Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk ETC. I have Donald McIntyre with me. He's a former member of the ETCDEV team. He was doing marketing and business development for Ethereum Classic, and he has a lot of information about the Atlantis hard fork, upcoming ECIPs, and just a lot of other great information to enlighten us. So thank you, Donald.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. So I've seen you've written articles, and I know you're passionate about Ethereum Classic. So before we get into all the great info you have for us, why don't you kind of just share your background, whatever you want to share, career, education, and then also it would be interesting after you do that, the second part, how you got involved with blockchains and then specifically Ethereum Classic.
Very good. Bueno, when I was 23, 24, I was working the financial market in Argentina. I'm from Argentina, born in Costa Rica, but raised in Argentina. And we were dealing with Wall Street firms, and one of those firms, UBS, hired me. So I went in 1992 to live here to the States in Miami as a stockbroker. And I worked there until 1995. Then I was hired by Morgan Stanley, and also as a stockbroker. So from 1992 until 1999, I was a stockbroker in big firms, Wall Street firms. But in the meantime, the .com boom was occurring, and I decided to start a company. So I started the .com company in 2000 called Dinero.net. It was based in Buenos Aires. I went back to Argentina, and we had operations in Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. It was basically a personal finance and wealth management website and service for households, for individuals and families. Then the .com boom ended in a crash, and my investor, even though I had a lot of money from my investors who were Carlos Lim, the Mexican telecom owner of Telmex and America Mobile and all that, and other investors like SoftBank, they had lost so much money in their other companies and their portfolios that they kindly asked me to wind down the company, to shut it down and return the money. They had Series A shares, so they had the right to get the money, and that was in 2002. And then I started another company, which was a wealth management practice called McIntyre SA. The idea was to be more or less like what it is today, Personal Capital, which was a network of financial advisors with tools to connect with their clients through the platform, also in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and other countries. And I was one of the financial advisors, and I had my own portfolio of customers and clients. So that was for 10 years until 2012. I came here to Denver to visit my sister, and I met my current wife traveling here. So that's why I ended up living here in Miami, in Denver. And that's also when I heard about Bitcoin for the first time. I came here and I started to dedicate myself to financial technology, because of my mix of experience in Wall Street and also in tech. Right. Somebody told me about Bitcoin in 2012, but I went to read about it in Wikipedia. I didn't understand much. I tried to read the white paper at the time. So it was several months until it was like February or March of 2013 that Bitcoin went up to 90 suddenly. And that caught my attention again. So I had a personal finance website at the time called New Financial, and I was doing interviews with fintech startups from Silicon Valley, and I started, instead of talking to traditional fintech startups, I started to talk to people in the Bitcoin space. And that's how I got involved in the blockchain. I met Vitalik and many more people in 2013. And then so during that time, I was thinking that I could actually apply my wealth management background on the blockchain, no, especially using smart contracts, which was a concept that during 2013 was theoretical because Bitcoin didn't support smart contracts, but we were all waiting for smart contracts in the future. And Vitalik invented Ethereum. He presented it in January of 2014, and ever since I was in that community, in the Ethereum community, participating just like any other person, thinking of projects to do. And by the first quarter of 2015, I had already thought out and ideated what is called Etherplan, which was my startup at the time. It was a wealth management startup on Ethereum. Basically, the portfolio of each client, instead of being in Merrill Lynch or in Schwab, it would be a smart contract in Ethereum. And not only that, but because it's programmable, and because the custody is basically held by the user, it would have many other features that traditional accounts don't have. For example, you could connect your beneficiaries, and if the wealth transfer to your beneficiaries or the inheritance could be done automatically instead of being through the legal system and stuff like that. So that was my whole idea of Etherplan.
So first, I have to say that's very impressive. You just come up with an idea and then you try to implement it. So you've raised funds in the past. You've started multiple companies. So you must be really creative, proactive, assertive.
Proactive and assertive, yes. I can see that in my personality, but creative, or whether I make good decisions or not, well, no, that's more random. And one of those things that I did of being proactive is I just contacted Nick Szabo. He's the father of smart contracts, and my Ethereum and Etherplan, my project, was about smart contracts basically. So if you go and see the papers of Nick Szabo on the web, right, you're gonna see that he always puts his email. So I just sent an email to him.
See, now that there you're being assertive again. See, some people might have been hesitant to email the great Nick Szabo, but okay.
Yeah, I sent him an email telling him if he would like to participate. I was looking for funding, the seed round. So if he would like to participate in the seed round, or be my advisor. And the next day in the morning, I see that he responded.
Okay.
And it was very dry, like the response was something like, interesting. Do you have knowledge or background in back office operations of the banking system? And I responded, no, but I could check out whatever he needed to know. And we spent like 2 weeks talking, because in the end it was a huge coincidence, because he was thinking of a project that was also related to securities on the blockchain, and mine was wealth management, where people invest in security. So basically they were very related. So that's why we ended up like emailing each other for like 2 weeks. And he said, okay, I accept. I want to be your advisor, and you can be my advisor in my project. So that's how I contacted Nick, and I was his advisor. He was my advisor. We spent several months seeking for seed investment for Etherplan. I contacted him like more or less August, and by November, we had spoken to all the VCs that you can think about, the typical Silicon Valley, New York-based VCs. from A16Z to the others, the brand names. And we spent much more time explaining what the hell is a blockchain and what is a smart contract and what is Ethereum than presenting the project itself. And they were so far away that at the time it was too early to get seed investment from them. So when it was clear that I had to shelf Etherplan, which is still shelved, he invited to me to be his co-founder in his project that is called Global Financial Access, which is more of an infrastructure for securities, because it was about gathering financial institutions and for all of them to back a smart contract, and that smart contract would replicate the behavior of for example, Apple stock, but on Ethereum.
So it was project.
Excuse me?
Nick Szabo had also an ambitious project.
Yeah, it was very ambitious, not because it's something that was ambitious in terms of technically, which is ambitious because at the time, 2015, Ethereum had many less functionality than now, and there was less knowledge in general. So to build smart contracts was very complex. But it was very ambitious because to put together 20 or 30 banks in this project, and then to convince regulators that everything is okay, and then to convince VCs that regulators are going to be okay and that the banks are going to be okay, was very difficult to do at the time. So we were in that effort until May of 2016, where we also saw that we were not going to get the support from any of those constituents for this project. So I became an advisor again for Global Financial Access. And that project, Nick, I think he has it there. It's always a possibility, but it's something that is, I would say, shelved. I don't know. You would have to ask Nick.
So you guys were just both ahead of your time. It was too early.
Yeah, it was too early. Yeah. But by May, I had already seen that the DAO was picking up steam. It had $50 million, and a week later had $100 million deposited in, and then the next week it had $150 million. So I said, okay, I'm gonna, because I was always part of the Ethereum community, I'm gonna present Etherplan to the Ethereum community as a project that the DAO could finance.
Right.
Remember that?
Yes.
So
it was a VC operation. That's right.
Yeah. The DAO was a VC, but where all the people who put money could vote.
Right.
So I just presented the project like many others were presented. And I was talking to people and going through like a decentralized due diligence, from Vitalik to many other members of the community were asking me questions. I presented the financials, projections, everything that I presented to VCs before.
Okay.
And suddenly one morning, one of my advisors in Etherplan, Pamela Morgan, she told me, "Oh, such a pity, on Skype." And I was, yes, I have to talk to a lot of people, but I'm going to today, talking about something else. And she said, "No, did you see what happened? What? The DAO was hacked." And then that was, I don't know, one day in June, I think.
Right.
And that was the end of my of Etherplan again, because the DAO ended, no? Right. From then on, I've been for 2 or 3 years, until 2018 at least, debating very, very frequently and very, I don't know how to say it, opposing the ideas of doing the irregular state change to fix the DAO and to return the money to people and all that. I was against all that, of the 5 or 10% of people who were against all that, but they did it anyway. And the split occurred, no? And then Ethereum split from Ethereum Classic, and Ethereum Classic remained as the main net, which is unchanged, and Ethereum changed it, turned into this fork, no?
Right.
But at the time, because they took all the money, all the developers, and all the noise was there, I continued there. My philosophy was to try to continue to debate and argue with Vitalik, Vlad, Nick Johnson, and everybody else there. Emin Gun Sirer from Cornell, etc., that it wasn't a good idea to keep that philosophy.
Right.
And I started to question past decisions in Ethereum, because Ethereum had already the idea of going to proof of stake and sharding since the beginning,
right.
And subjective security instead of objective security and stuff like that. So that the DAO crisis was in a way strong enough to make me be skeptical about everything that I had heard before from them. So I started to question proof of stake, sharding, and all the plans, and started to focus more on security and try to research and study more security. So from 2016 until mid 2018, I've been debating with them, trying to convince them not to do all that roadmap. Yeah. And of course, it's not going to happen. They're going to continue.
Right.
And last year, Coinbase announced that they were listing ETC. Even though I had been following ETC like with my side eye all that time, it was still a small chain, and I really didn't pay much attention whether it was going to be successful or not. And I was more dedicated to debating with Ethereum and trying to change them rather than supporting ETC. But when Coinbase listed ETC, I said, okay, this is enough. I'm not going to waste my time with Ethereum, and I'm going to dedicate my the same time, but to ETC. Okay. And then, so I went to ETCDEV among many other websites like the ETC Cooperative and DCG. But when I went to ETCDEV, I saw that they were looking for a marketing and PR person. So I contacted Igor, and we spoke like for 2 or 3 weeks, and he ended up hiring me as a marketing and business development person. And this was July of 2018.
Okay, good. So it was a long road to get Ethereum Classic.
Yes.
Right. So, before we talk about the hard fork and the ECIPs, do you have any, because you grew up in Argentina, do you have any thoughts on, I know that the Argentinians really like Bitcoin, right? Because it doesn't rely on the government. They really like cryptocurrency down there. Do you, I'm sure you appreciate that, or do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any family members down there that are using cryptocurrency to bypass the government?
My 3 kids from my first marriage live there. And when I was working for ETCDEV and earning money in ETC, I created an account for each of them, and I talk to them all the time about Bitcoin and Ethereum Classic. But they're still young. They're like 19. It's 20, 21, and 23. They go to college, and they're still spending more time in college and Instagramming than thinking about their savings or these things. But yes, I have a lot of friends there. I know the guys of RSK. Argentina, because of its history of economic instability and monetary instability. I mean, in the last 50 years, Argentina has changed currencies 5 times. And inflation has always been a chronic problem there. Living there in the 80s and the 90s, I went through 2 hyperinflations in Argentina. Then there was another hyperinflation when I went back with my startup. So that's a chronic problem. So people have evolved to be very entrepreneurial, and rather than have stability with their projects and things, people are very, when you talk to an Argentinian, they know about everything, and from economics to engineering to what's going on in the world, because they have to be alert so much.
Right. So is it legal, or is it a gray area if some Argentinian said, I want to do everything with cryptocurrency and never have the Argentinian currency, would the government be okay with that, or how do they want to stop it, or what?
It's very similar to here. If you want to do business, that the cryptocurrency itself is okay in Argentina.
Okay.
And but you have to be either a registered brokerage firm, or a registered money transmission firm, or a bank,
okay,
or some sort of financial license.
Just to buy and sell cryptocurrency?
Yeah, to deal with the public, yes. To be a developer, no. To build apps okay, and develop RSK, etc. They don't have to.
I see.
I'm sure that if I don't know of any. I think there was one called Ripio that did an ICO, and I'm sure it's as a gray area as here in Canada and Europe, no, to do an ICO.
Okay.
So and that's it. But what I was saying before is that Argentinians have very strong entrepreneurial spirit, and they always want to know everything about new technology, because of this spirit that they have of survivalship. Right. So Argentina within Latin America is a huge hub for Bitcoin, Ethereum.
Right. Good.
In general.
So why don't we now switch to describing this Atlantis hard fork, and why is that so important, and what can we expect from that?
Very good. Bueno, the Atlantis hard fork is looking to integrate forks that happened in Ethereum. Mm-hmm. Because they are good ideas by themselves, and they make the functionality of Ethereum Classic better, and also because it creates this compatibility that is part of the philosophy of ETC. No, it has been part of the philosophy until now. The two hard forks that happened in Ethereum were in 2016, Spurious Dragon, and then in 2017, I think it was Byzantium. So Atlantis is going to integrate several things from there: the state tree clearing, contract code size limit. Then from Byzantium, some opcodes like revert and return data size, return data copy, static call, and the precompiled contracts. And then replacing the intermediate state root field in transaction receipts. And finally, change the difficulty adjustment to target mean block time, including uncles. That in particular is very important for ETC because it stabilizes issuing. The way I understand it in Ethereum and ETC, you have the main blocks of the chain, but you also have uncles. But those uncles also get paid a little bit of money. So it depends on the uncle rate whether the final monetary supply of ETC is going to be 210 million or 230 million, no?
Right.
If you control that and you include uncles in the difficulty adjustment, then it's not so easy to create uncles and issue more money. So that's the rationale of that last change.
Okay. All right. So all kinds of little improvements then. And
yeah.
And all things being equal, I mean, it's beneficial for both platforms to be compatible, right? There's no reason to have minor differences.
For the platforms, I think it's neutral. What is very beneficial is for the social layer, for developers to be able to work on one chain or the other without a lot of barriers in the middle. I think it benefits the social layer and their work. However, I think that because Ethereum is so focused on migrating to F 2.0, and that is a proof of stake system with sharding.
Right.
I think there's going to be divergence. If you think about it, these hard forks in Ethereum happened like 2 years ago. So evidently, ETC is very conservative and very careful when implementing all these things.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to say is that the state tree clearing of these 6 changes, the state tree clearing was the only one that I got feedback from where there was some objection, because it's clearing of many accounts in the ETC blockchain that were part of a spam attack.
Right.
The glitch or the security hole that enabled that spam attack has been closed, but the accounts are still there. So that makes the chain very large. And apparently, there was one philosophical objection, which is, okay, if it was something that was coded and it happened because it was possible in the protocol, then it should remain. We shouldn't change the state. Mm-hmm. The other concern was just technical, not philosophical. Was just there were questions of what is the actual size of those accounts, if it's really relevant, and if it's worth running the risk of integrating this change, because all changes have some risk, no? Right. But fortunately, Zach Mitten, who raised that concern, he himself did the research and he measured things to see what was the risk-reward ratio, and he concluded that it's worth doing the change. So I haven't seen any concrete feedback that everybody agrees, but I think it's going to happen. Okay. So there's no major controversies here.
Okay. So for the people that don't know, so go back in the history of Ethereum, there was the certain operations, the gas cost was too low, and so it was really cheap to just do a lot of these minor transactions and really fill up the database, the state database.
Yeah.
With all these meaningless, pointless accounts.
Yeah.
Information. And so the idea then is that you could remove those, and there's no harm, there's no issues with removing these empty accounts.
Yeah, you can remove it and you reduce the size of the weight of the chain. So people who are synchronizing new nodes can do it much more easily and in a trust minimized way. And also it doesn't affect immutability. Philosophically, it doesn't affect immutability in any way, because it's just spam accounts that they don't have any purpose in the chain.
Right.
They don't have any balance or any property or any smart contracts or anything.
Right. So the blockchain is still deterministic. Everybody's funds are the same. Everything still operates the same. We still have all the history.
Yes.
Yeah. So
and Atlantis, which includes these these exchanges. Atlantis is the nickname of this hard fork in ETC. Is totally backward compatible. So nothing in the past accounts or smart contracts, nothing is going to change.
Right. Very good.
Some people ask why, if I'm not an engineer, why am I doing this? And I guess that the first reason is what you said before, because I have this personality of doing things all the time, and the other reason is because actually the core developers who are involved here, the three developers are Isaac Ardis from ETC Labs Core, SOC1C, that's his handle on Discord. He works for Parity and ETC Labs Core, I think. Mm-hmm. And then Wei Tang, who also works for Parity and ETC Labs Core. Not the three of them, but the SOC1C at one point was posting on Discord if that everything is ready for public debate, etc. And I saw that the ECIP was hanging there for this public process. So I just asked if he wanted me to coordinate a call or something. So that's why I've been coordinating this. And we had a call last Friday, which was very productive, with miners, wallet operators, node operators, core developers. It's on YouTube, and people can go and see it, watch it there, or listen to it. So this is why I'm coordinating. And the next steps, I think, are for ECIP 1054, which is Atlantis, to change the status from draft to accepted. Mm-hmm. And then for the four teams, IOHK, Mantis, then Parity for their client, mm-hmm. and then the multi-Geth teams and Classic Geth, which is the community client, for all those teams to actually merge these changes. And then the next step is for miners to download before September, before block 8,750,000, which is the block that is programmed to implement the changes.
Mm-hmm.
So miners and node operators have to download it and install these nodes, these new node software with the changes, and it would be actually deployed by mid-September.
All right, very
Those
nice.
are the next steps.
Very good. Okay. And so now that you've worked with this specific ECIP, what do you want to say something about the ECIP model in general? I know it's decentralized. And so how do you feel that the process works to you? Go ahead.
Yeah, Ethereum Classic has the ECIP model. ECIP means Ethereum Classic Improvement Proposal. Mm-hmm. And it's a system very similar, or they use as an example the BIP model, which is the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal model, okay, which was also used by, or is used by Ethereum, and in Ethereum is called EIP model, EIP process, mm-hmm, which means Ethereum Improvement Proposal process. So the three processes are more or less are very similar. No, they are all in a single repository in GitHub. And there's usually reference client in those repositories. In the case of Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin Core. In the case of Ethereum, is Go Ethereum. In the case of ETC Classic, is Classic ETH. And everybody was living very happily with those processes. In the last 6 months, Ethereum Classic, there was some controversies because there was one user called CryCoder that kicked out some admins from the main GitHub repository of ETC, mm-hmm, and that started a whole series of events in the social layer. And at some point, Ethereum Classic Core, the team, which is where it is the parent company of ETC Labs Core, is where CryCoder works. Uh-huh. And 2 months ago, they decided to create their own ECIP process outside of the main community repo, okay, which was called Eclipse, ECLIP, which stands for Ethereum Classic Labs Improvement Proposal Process. Okay. And that also created some concern. I was very concerned at the time, and I wrote about why we need everybody to be in the community repo doing the ECIP process and not to be diverging and stuff like that. And there was a period of controversy. And one day, Zach Belford, he's also a developer for Ethereum ETC Labs Core. He told me that he didn't feel that it was fair to have an identical system as Bitcoin and as Ethereum EIP because they were very centralized in one repo. And why would a developer want to be in a centralized repo with centralized admins and editors, right, if he wanted to operate independently? So he said, why don't we do a decentralized system? And he told me the idea. His idea was basically to have each team have their own ECIPs and numbered cryptographically using what he created, which is him with Shane Jonas. They created something called the Star IP, which is a numbering system that cryptographically creates a number for each ECIP, so they cannot be confused or superimposed and they can stay unique and have no conflicts, even if they were in different repos, okay, and managed by different teams. So I thought that was very original. He said that he showed me a video also about the speaker who talks about open source systems, etc. So he finally convinced me. Okay. So I dropped my idea of having a centralized ECIP to having this decentralized ECIP process that Zach told me about. But both Zach and Shane, like everybody knows, they've been working a lot in many other things. Mm-hmm. So also Zach told me, why don't you lead this? and communicate it to the community and talk about it and try to implement this model. Okay. So I did that. I wrote several blog posts, etc. And I would say that we're still that we are like in the middle. We are not using the old ECIP system, okay, because, for example, ECIP 1054 Atlantis is in the ETC Labs core repo, so it's not in the original one. So we migrated from a centralized to somewhat decentralized system. But the decentralized ECIP model requires 4 components, and those are not being used yet for the current open ECIPs. So I think we're migrating, and I think it's okay to do things slowly in ETC.
What are the 4 components that the decentralized ECIP model needs?
Well, one is to have a URI system to identify all ECIPs. Mm-hmm. And that's actually an ECIP created by Wei Tang called ECIP URI that basically defines that you have a base domain, then like a category called ECIPs, mm-hmm, and then the number of the ECIP at the end. That's the URI. That's a structure that, if we all agree, we can use independent if you're IOHK or ETC Labs Core or Parity or any other team. The other thing is that number at the end of the URI has to be this cryptographic number, and the format is ECIP dash and the cryptographic number. The cryptographic number is basically you get a standard preamble that everybody should use for all ECIPs, mm-hmm, and you hash them using SHA-3 and then you encode them into base 58, okay, and you use the last 8 characters as the official hash of that ECIP or number. But of those 8 characters, the last 4 are just the naming characters. For example, if the last 4 are 7GYE, then that ECIP would be ECIP 7GYE. So in the future, instead of having ECIPs like 1,000, 1,001, and 1,002, and so on, we're going to have like weird 4-digit 4 characters. But at least there's a minimized risk of conflict.
Right. No, okay, go ahead and finish your list, and then I was going to say something.
Bueno, so that's the, I would say, the identification, okay, system, no, the URI and the numbers. And then in 2017, actually, Wei Tang had written ECIP 1000, which is basically a complete description of a protocol to follow to create these improvement proposals, which is very similar to Bitcoin, and it uses it uses a status system from draft to accepted, and it goes through different phases, and then as the community goes agreeing on the changes, it goes migrating until it's finally merged. So that is perfectly okay. So it's part of the 4 components to follow that process. So independently, if you're using different repos and different teams, everybody ideally would use the same ECIP 1000 process, no, and status stages. And the last part is what we call the aggregation sites. Each team could have an aggregation site either in GitHub or an independent website where they aggregate, where they put a home page with their own ECIPs and another page with the aggregation of all the other ECIPs in the ecosystem. So it's easy to find for everybody.
Good. And is this going to be implemented with a smart contract on ETC?
For now, no, there's no smart contract contemplated in the 4 components, I think.
For the URI, it seems like the URI, right? That seems like the natural place to do it. And if you wanted to do the URI in a decentralized manner. Yeah,
at some point there was a discussion about using a smart contract. I think that Tomush Dibal spoke about that. Uh-huh. But for now, these 4 components doesn't have that. But I think it would be ideal to use ETC.
Right.
Like maybe even for the numbering system. And for the ECIP to have a reference on the blockchain.
Right. So then you could this avoids all the politics, right, of who controls the ECIP process. All those problems, right, are minimized.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, that was a very original, creative idea. No, that's good.
Yeah. I think that Zach had a very good idea, because it's I think it's even very elegant, because now, I mean, the other day I helped Shane Jonas to start a Bitcoin improvement proposal to propose open RPC. And just by reading how the process is, you have to go first to the Bitcoin mailing list.
Okay.
But to go to the Bitcoin mailing list, you have to be approved to participate in the list. Then when you send the email with your proposal, that has to be approved to be sent to everybody. Then if it's approved by them, then you can write a BIP. And then the BIP is reviewed by the editors. And then if you're lucky, and if they like it, which is, I don't know, 4, 5, 10 editors, I don't know, it moves forward. No. I can see now when I did this, I can see now why Zach, Shane, and the others were like continually trying to move away from that kind of centralization.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of, there's a big bureaucracy.
Yeah. And not only that, you have to wait for things to move from one stage to the other, like from draft to discussion, from discussion to pre-approved, from pre-approved to maybe pre-approved. And then, I mean, it's incredible. And in our system, again, this is what Zach told me. He said, each team, they just go forward. Anybody can go to their webpage and discuss. And the way of indicating to the community whether the team likes or not the change is by merging it. Mm-hmm. So if you have 4 or 5 teams with 4 or 5 clients, and 4 don't merge it and 1 merges it, well, evidently that ECIP is not very agreeable. And if they all merge it, that's the way of that's the way of communicating. It's more of an emergent system. Okay. Which is not insecure, because even if all teams collude and stuff like that, the miners are still independent, and the node operators as well, and they can still choose whether to adopt or not the changes. So I think it was a very, very clever system, which is basically imitates the way all these open source systems work, no?
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. That's right.
It's a sort of emergent consensus.
Yes. All right. So, yes, you've given us a good overview of the Atlantis hard fork and why it was a good idea. And then you've also covered the decentralized ECIP model. Is there anything else that we missed on those 2 topics?
On those 2 topics, no. I mentioned that the ECIP 1054 Atlantis is very important. The block that is going to activate the changes is 8,750,000. We are in the discussion phase. So the next step is to move it to accept it and the clients to merge it. And then the final stage is for miners and node operators to actually deploy them. And then it would activate. So as long as we said that, I think that we're okay.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, Donald. Thank you for giving us that information, and we appreciate all that you do. I know you're doing this on your own, and so thank you for all that your volunteer work that you do. And also for anybody listening, if you want to hire Donald, I believe sometime, so contact him. But yes, but thank you, Donald, for all this great work and for your updates.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your work and this show. I think it's very useful. I listen to it all the time, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to chat.
All right, wonderful. Take care.
Bye-bye.